Hello. Well, we are going to be talking about a single, discrete topic that I want you to put into practice this week because you may have listened to these episodes of Be a Better Lawyer and heard me talk about mindset and hear the stories that I share around the importance of observing how you think. But no matter how many times you hear episodes, it's not the same as putting this work into practice. So let me share with you a story from a client just this week who we have been talking each week around the different mindsets, actions that he needed to make shifts in to achieve his financial goal for this year. And not only a financial goal, but we've made that financial goal in alignment with how he wants to live his life. He's very family driven and he wants to provide for them. So we have been looking at increasing his revenue goal while increasing his quality of life. And this story just goes to the heart of how important it is to observe your mind. It's very difficult when we don't have somebody who can listen, who's not hearing, not looking for those precise words that you say that are blocking you from getting what you want, that are preventing you from getting where you want to go. And this really came into full focus with a very simple thing that we were talking about. We were talking about how he was noticing resentment building around working for one particular client, doing work for one particular client. And it was because, as we tracked what was going on, it was because he was charging this client less than he was charging other clients. And the reason for that is because this was an older client and he had never had the conversation with this client about raising his rates. As we were talking through this, he said these words: I don't want to overcharge him. I don't want to overcharge him. And when I asked him, do you think that you are overcharging him? He said, no, I'm undercharging him. But his actual belief shone through those words. I don't want to overcharge him, because he actually had a belief that he was overcharging. Now, intellectually, he could understand that he was undercharging, that he wasn't charging him the actual rate for his services, the value of his services as they have had increased over the years, that this client had received way more than his money's worth over the years because he had received basically a discount over the years. But my client has had some beliefs around the value of his services. And, we've been doing work over the course of about a year now on money beliefs and the value of his services. And over that time, we've been able to make these tweaks that have gotten him on pace to achieve his revenue target for this year. And that has included looking at what are his rates and why does he charge that? And why is he charging so little compared to other people in his industry who are in his area? And the heart of it always comes down to, what are we thinking? And the best guide to what we are thinking are the words that we say out loud, because they're so reflexive. So if you notice yourself saying things out loud that are in contradiction to what you want, know that you have some thoughts, some limiting beliefs that are preventing you from having what you want. In this particular case, when we broke it down, it was very simple for him to see logically that he didn't have that he knew intellectually that he was undercharging, but he felt bad. And this brings me to a second point that is related to this topic, which are our beliefs are generated to keep us comfortable, to help us feel safe. So this belief that my client had generated that he didn't want to overcharge, right? So his belief was that he was overcharging. It was a reflection of a fear that he had that if he raised his rates for this client, the client would leave him, or the client wouldn't like him, or the client, in this specific instance, my client was having this conversation with himself about what he believed his client would tell him if he were to raise his rates. And just thinking about what he anticipated that his client would say if he raised his rates was enough for him to then back off from raising the rates, enough for him not to have a conversation with his client about the rates. And that only happened, right? His brain only created that fear because it wanted to keep him safe. It wanted to keep him comfortable. It feels very safe not to stretch yourself, not to do anything different than you've done in the past, not to rock the boat. But in order to achieve goals, you've got to rock the boat. You've got to stretch yourself. And in order to stretch yourself, you have to be aware of those thoughts that are limiting you, that are preventing you from stretching yourself. Now, if you are looking to achieve a goal of any kind, be aware that you have thoughts right now about that goal. You have thoughts about what your ability to achieve that goal is. You have thoughts about what other people are going to think about you when you achieve that goal. You have lots of thoughts built around preventing you from achieving that goal. Not because you can't do it, not because you don't have the capacity, not for any of those reasons. It's only because our brains were designed, that primal part of our brain was designed to keep us safe, to prevent us from stretching beyond where we are, because if we stretch, it feels dangerous. It feels scary. Keep in mind, everything that you have done up to this point has kept you alive. A roof over your head, food on the table, money in the bank. Every action that you have taken, everything that you have done up to this point has kept you safe. So your brain, as illogical as it might sound, your brain is saying, no, let's keep you safe. Dina, let's keep you safe. Michelle, let's keep you safe. We don't want to do anything differently. Everything we've been doing up till now has been just fine. So let's not rock the boat. And that's exactly what my client's brain was doing. My client's brain was saying, no, 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 you've had this client for a really long time, and they pay you and they bring you work, and you are putting dinner on the table and you have a roof over your head. So let's not rock the boat. And that is very, very nice of our brain in some ways. And it is something that we've got to make friends with. We've just got to understand that our brain doesn't mean us harm, but it will prevent you from achieving what you want to achieve if you listen to it, if you don't challenge it. So because my client comes to me every single week, we challenge these thoughts, and that's why we're able to make progress on his goal. So you've got to be challenging yourself every step of the way. What am I believing? You got to know what you're thinking, first of all. You've got to understand what your thoughts are. Now, the only reason my client had that awareness is because I can hear it. I can pick up on it because I'm having a conversation. I'm trained to listen for these things. And then I can go in and I can say, okay, let's challenge this. Because this belief that you have, let's tear it apart. Let's take it apart bit by bit. You know logically that it's not fair that this person is getting charged less than everybody else. You know logically that you are undercutting yourself and that it's not fair to your practice because your practice isn't getting nourished because you are not having the difficult conversation with your client to raise the rates. And you've also got to handle the nervous system part of this as well, because when your brain is bringing up these thoughts, these fears, these worries, these concerns, what it's doing is it's activating your nervous system. That nervous system, that's that fight or flight, and you can't think because your heart's beating so fast. You feel paralyzed. You procrastinate on projects you know you need to do. That's when you know your nervous system is activated. When you're not having those difficult conversations, those conversations that are uncomfortable but necessary for the growth of your practice, for the health of your practice, that's your nervous system preventing you from doing that. So, step one, you got to have awareness that the thoughts that you're thinking, and you've got to be able to challenge them. Step two. And to do that, you also have to be cognizant of how your thoughts affect your nervous system, because your thoughts are what create your feelings. So if you're thinking, my client is going to leave me if I tell him that I'm going to raise my rates, it's very natural that you're going to start having some fear and anxiety come up in your body. That's a nervous system activation. So what is important here is to begin to create safety for yourself so that you can do the difficult thing. So with my client here, what we worked on was looking at, okay, what do you know the facts to be? One, you don't actually think this client is going to fire you. Like, that's a reaction that your brain has, but you can see that, no, you know what, I think what's more reasonable is that my client might say words and I might feel something. You know, my client might say something like, "Oh, that's really expensive." And I might feel a little agitated, but I can just sit with the agitation and allow that feeling to pass, because I know that he's just saying words. And those words are only a reflection of, you know, what he's thinking, which is, oh, he's going to raise his rates again. And that's okay, because he knows, my client knows, for the health of his practice, for the fairness of all of his clients, for the simplicity of his practice, he needs to raise his rates in a way that makes sense. And it doesn't make sense for him to keep his rates lower for this one particular client than for any others. He also notices that when he doesn't put his rate commensurate with this client and all the other clients, he puts off doing projects for that client, because he knows innately this is not fair. And so he resists doing that work. He puts it off to the last minute. And that's what happens when we don't have awareness of our thoughts and we're not paying attention to our feelings, is we cannot solve for these kinds of problems, and we don't take the actions that we know are going to help us achieve the results that we want. So for my particular client, we went through his thoughts. I picked up on this thought that he had, that he was, quote, charging too much, which logically he knew wasn't true, but he really believed it. And so we needed to chip away at it. We needed to look at it. And when he got clear focus on what was going on, he understood the negative consequences of him not raising his rates were actually outweighing any discomfort he might feel by raising his rates, by having the conversation with this client to increase the rate to be fair with all of his clients. Are you doing this in your practice? Are you doing this on the day-to-day, the week-to-week? Are you asking yourself these questions? What do I think about raising my rates? What am I afraid will happen? Is that a realistic thing that could happen? If so, am I prepared no matter what, that I have enough in the bank that I can leave my job in order to create the business I want, that I have set a number, not just enough, because that's not specific. Our brain doesn't do well with unspecific. So we want to have something specific. I want 6 months savings in the bank before I leave my job, so that I can remind myself that I am safe. I can calm my nervous system as I build my business. If you are considering raising your rates, are you okay if your client says no? I always come from a place of unattachment to whether or not a client says yes or no. This requires regulating your nervous system. It requires being aware that it is normal for your nervous system to feel activated, you to feel fear, worry, anxiety, and that it is then up to you to calm your nervous system so that you can take the actions that you need to take to move yourself to your goal. The only reason we don't do things, the only reason we don't achieve the goals that we set for ourselves or take action towards them is because of the feeling in our body, right? Because the thoughts are what's creating the feelings in our body, and our feelings are what are then going to dictate what actions we do or we don't take. If we're not able to, if we don't have the skills to calm our nervous system, we can't take the actions we need to get the result that we want. And that's what we did in this session, my client and I, as we worked on just regulating his nervous system. Because his thoughts were creating some agitation, some nervousness, fear, even a little guilt. And those feelings were enough to prevent him from having the conversation with his client to raise his rates. So what we needed to do was calm the nervous system. And when he did that, he could make the decision that, yes, this is what I'm going to do. This is the right thing for me. It's the right thing for my practice. And it's actually the right thing for my client, because then I do his work in a timely manner, because my body says yes. It's a full-bodied yes when I think about doing work for this client. It's not just a hesitant, resistant yes, because I already agreed to it and I guess I'll do it, which is one of the problems a lot of lawyers face, is that they're not charging the value of their work, and then they don't do the work because they don't like that. It's like they already sense it's not fair that they're not getting paid the value of their work. And that was what was going on here. So if you're experiencing the same thing, all that's happening is you don't have the awareness around the thoughts, and you haven't created safety for yourself by calming your nervous system. And calming your nervous system can look a lot like, how do I show myself? How do I prove to myself that I am going to be okay no matter what? How do I prove that to myself? Do I prove it by looking at my bank account? Do I prove it by remembering that I raised my rates last week with somebody and they said yes? You have to prove that to yourself. And when you regulate your nervous system, you can get yourself to do just about everything, anything that you need to do. It is a practice, which is what I'm doing with my clients every single week. And you get better at it the more consistent you are at it. So with this particular client, I meet with them every single week, and we chip away at his goal. We do a little bit on here. We do a little bit there. We look at a rate here. We look at a rate there. We look at where he's spending money here. We look at where he's not investing in himself there. We look at where he's leading his team here. We look at where he's not leading his team there. And this is a process that you do over time. I think a lot of lawyers think that they just have to flip their whole practice upside down in order to achieve their goal. And that comes from that fear that you're not moving fast enough. It's coming from an activated nervous system. And if you feel like you're behind, that's an activated nervous system. So if you want to achieve your goal, what actually has to happen, and it feels so counterintuitive, I get it because I've been there, I've built businesses, so I understand that you have to calm your nervous system down so that you can then take clear action towards what you want to achieve. In this case, it was a matter of making a phone call. And that can sound really simple, but if your nervous system is activated, it can be the hardest thing you ever do. Ask me how I know. Saying, yes, I'm going to raise my rates, and having those fears come up, and let yourself know that this is okay. This is normal. All that's happening is I am up-leveling myself. I am being the person I am meant to become. And that requires these skills, the skills of knowing what you're thinking, having that awareness, noticing when your nervous system is activated, and then creating safety for yourself to take action consistent with the goal that you want to achieve. All right, that is what I wanted to share with you, my friend. I know I talk about this all the time in this podcast, but I wanted to share this in this very one specific context because it shows up so often with lawyers that I talk to. All right, my friend, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. Bye.